is it more valuable to you to be in stock and have your clients or your customers recurringly come to your website or come into your store and trust that you're going to be in stock on things? If you value that strategically, it's, in our opinion, many times worth the reduced margin to be in stock on that, because you're not going to lose those lifetime customers. They're going to know you're in stock on it and they don't care where it came from.
I'm co-founder and CEO Josh Bartel. I'm joined once again by Drew Roth, one of our consultants. And today we're going to be talking about product sourcing, and particularly product sourcing within the automotive and automotive aftermarket industries. We have a number of clients who are large distributors, wholesalers, and online retailers of automotive parts, both maintenance, aftermarket, performance aftermarket. And this is just a really common issue for them. The idea that for every item they sell, there are very often multiple sources for that product. Pretty much anything where you're not dealing with kind of a custom bespoke performance part that can be bought in a lot of different places and is somewhat commoditized. Think brake pads, body panels, that sort of thing. So today we wanted to get into the weeds a little bit on how to think about multiple sources being available for each product and how to choose the most, not just profitable, but the best source. Not just profitability is not the only consideration when you do have those multiple sourcing options available. And we'll also get into what to do when one of your sources is an overseas supplier that's probably offering things at a much lower price than a domestic supplier, and how to think about sourcing those products. So Drew, maybe we get started. Can you walk us through some of the considerations that people should be taking into account when selecting a source for domestically sourced products? So companies that generally have similar pricing and similar lead times, what are you looking at on an item by item, purchase order by purchase order level to select the most profitable source?
Yeah. So the three things that I think about are primary to consider are: one, can I drop ship from the vendor or not? Two, what is the cost and what do I sell it at? What's my margin going to be for every vendor? But arguably most important is, what is the lead time? When can I expect this to arrive every time I purchase it? So for domestic suppliers, broadly, we're going to see 30 days or less lead times. So these are going to be quick turnarounds, but they're probably going to be significantly more expensive on a unit cost basis than importing those items.
So for these domestic sources, I think something we're kind of taking for granted is that you have a preferred source. It's someone who you probably have a pre-existing relationship with. And so when that source can't deliver, they're stocked out, I think that's when the opportunity comes up to buy from somewhere else. You mentioned drop shipping. When do you think drop shipping might be a good solution if you're out of stock and your preferred supplier is also out of stock?
Yeah, if you anticipate that you might only be out of stock for a very short amount of time, or the PO that you have open and you're waiting to arrive actually arrives, drop shipping might be the least hassle thing to do. It's going to cost more, but you don't actually have to receive it at your facility. If it's just going to be a handful of items or a handful of transactions that you think you might otherwise miss out on, drop shipping is probably going to be the way to go in that case. But if you think you might be out of stock for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you don't know when this large PO that you expect at some time in the near future is actually going to arrive, that's when it probably starts to make more sense thinking about making a small stock purchase and actually bringing that into your facility to prevent the stock out.
And that is probably more common. You alluded to import buys, where you have your primary supplier, they're overseas, they can provide something at a really low cost, but the lead time might be 4, 5, 9 months.
Yeah.
And so you will commonly find yourself in a situation where you have 30, 60 more days until you expect that big overseas receipt to arrive. As you said, then you start to examine domestic sources. So placing that stocking PO when you do see an extended window where you're going to be out of stock makes sense. How do we choose the right amount of stock to bring in? Because obviously we're going to hear from the CFO or whoever's keeping a track on finances if we're placing a lot of buys for a lot of material at a higher than normal cost, because our cost structure, obviously, and our pricing structure to our customers is based around getting the best cost.
Yeah. So one thing to consider is, obviously you're going to lose on margin operating on the assumption that it's going to be higher costs to order domestically. But is it more valuable to you to be in stock and have your clients or your customers recurringly come to your website or come into your store and trust that you're going to be in stock on things? If you value that strategically, it's, in our opinion, many times worth the reduced margin to be in stock on that, because you're not going to lose those lifetime customers. they're going to know you're in stock on it, and they don't care where it came from. They just care that it's the part that they want.
That's a great point. And I think it gets back to a core hygiene principle, which is understanding and quantifying the cost of stockouts.
Right.
It's something that virtually none of the clients we work with when we first come to them are doing. But if you know that for every day on this product, I'm out of stock, I'm losing $100 of gross profit, well, giving up $20 or $30 of gross profit per unit might not be a bad decision. It might ultimately be the more profitable thing to do.
Right. But I mean, to think about how much do I purchase? I know I need to gap buy. That's what we call it. How much should I buy? Well, generally, we're going to recommend a smaller purchase. You're not going to order the same amount that you would order overseas. The one thing that I would ask is, do we have an ETA on the large PO that we expect? No, we don't know when it's going to arrive. I would probably beef up that purchase because we have no idea when to expect a bulkier replenishment. If we have a trusted ETA, then the quantity is going to be almost entirely based on when I think that's going to arrive. But generally, we're operating in terms of 1 to 2 weeks at any given purchase. We feel more comfortable making those small incremental purchases, depending on what the specific vendor requirements are, than we do saying, I don't really know when this PO is going to land. I'm going to buy 2 months of stock right now. We wouldn't really recommend that.
Yeah, I think, obviously perfect world is you have this big receipt coming from overseas that's full of product you bought nice and cheap, and you place a PO with a domestic supplier, get them inventory, and you sell that more expensive inventory exactly down to zero the day the import buy arrives. Yep. Obviously, that's not going to happen every time. That's our goal, and that's what our system's trying to do. So yeah, it is kind of a balancing act of, well, if I don't buy enough and I see myself running out again, I'm going to have to place another PO. Obviously, placing another purchase order, another receipt, time and motion in the warehouse, that has a cost as well.
Right.
Those are all things that we consider. When we talk about sort of what a lot of our automotive clients call gray market products, where they're buying name brand manufacturer products, almost always from overseas and at very low cost. This is gray market, makes it sound like it's something nefarious. It's not illegal. It's just something that manufacturers would prefer our clients not do. But what's unique about those orders is that gray market product availability varies quite a lot. Lead time varies quite a lot.
Yep.
So those are the buys where you're most likely to have to do those gap buys domestically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, yeah, this is an interesting topic because when we get into multiple sourcing, we're going to lean back on, I mentioned one hygiene principle, which is understanding stock out costs, but another one is having good relationships with vendors.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so sometimes, even if you're dealing with a competitor, potentially another distributor, if you're a distributor, or you're dealing with a supplier that is a very small part of your business, it can be worth sometimes giving a portion of your business or more of your business to these partnerships that aren't very important to you right now. Because if you do get into a situation where you're out of a particular product, or God forbid, one of your primary suppliers goes out of business or stops doing business with you, having these relationships, even if they're relatively small scale, has lots of benefits. And on an ongoing basis, one way to ensure that you maintain this business relationship and maintain communication with the supplier's team and fulfillment side of their business is through these gap buys.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I want to know is when more often than not, you might have one alternative source, but you probably have 5. In the automotive industry, that's what we've seen. So I have placed a big purchase with my preferred vendor. It's, like you said, nice and cheap, but I think I'm going to run out of stock before that lands. How do I choose among the other 4? Cost is going to be a consideration. Generally, lead time. Who's going to be the fastest? Who's going to reliably get me my product when I expect it? Another layer of this, if your vendors are able to provide you inventory information, for some clients, what we're even able to do is evaluate whether or not a given vendor's in stock. So you might have a hard set when I'm not ordering from this primary vendor. This is my first alternate vendor, my second alternate vendor, my third. But if they all provide you inventory data, we can easily rule out the vendors that we know are out of stock. So maybe your second, your third are out of stock, but for whatever reason, your fourth alternate vendor has stock. We're going to default to them until your higher preferred vendors are back in stock.
That's a great point, because I think a lot of the times when your primary source is out of stock, it's because of an availability issue that's industry-wide.
Yep.
And you might have to hit 3, 4, 5 different places before you find one that stocks the item. Yet another reason why maintaining lots of relationships with lots of partners, even if they're not big relationships, can be beneficial. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us for another Hydrating podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.